Once again, good morning to you. Albert Camus, a French existentialist philosopher, was born in 1913 and died 1960. He was born in the French Algeria, the northern part of Africa. His father died in war, and when he was only 1 year old. And therefore, in his childhood, he experienced a lot of poverty. He was very fond of nature, and that we can find it in his writings. Besides poverty, he also had terminal illness. In particular, he suffered from tuberculosis. He also worked with the resistance group during the Second World War. And in 1957, he received Nobel Prize for Literature. He died rather young, very tragic death. Not because of tuberculosis, but he had a car crash and he died in 1960. Some of his important works are The Myth of Sisyphus, published in 1942, The Stranger, again published the same year, The Plague, 1947, The Rebel, 1951, The Fall, 1957. For your final essay for the SCE, you can take any of these writings because they are more of a novel type, but then it powerfully brings out some of the existential themes, and that may be much more interesting to you. So his love for nature has something to do with his North African background as well. As he himself thinks that every Algerian has a certain earthly innocence, by which the Algerian remains unaffected by all the other complexities of life, and therefore they tend to be straightforward and they live the present life to the full. I mean, that's how he looks at his life in Algeria. He is also critical of the European approach, especially the future-oriented attitude that is very prevalent in Europe. So you don't live in the present, you don't take life in its fullness now seriously, you somehow look towards the future for a better life. So the reason why he is critical about this is, for him, the here and now, the present moment, is what stands for the concreteness of our existence. It does not lead you to any delusion of power. Now, by projecting yourself to the future, you somehow have a delusion of power, and you fail to see the actual struggles, the actual suffering, the social suffering, the misery in the slums, because you are somehow eclipsed by this mirage of an eternal city. So you tend to forget about the justice here and now because you think about what is in store in the future. One of the important thoughts, at least in his earlier times, was absurdity. Now, the theme of absurdity is something very old. It's not Camus who has introduced it or invented it. We can find it in the very ancient literature, particularly in the Jewish narratives. Camus, however, has expressed it very accurately. He has expressed it accurately as the mood of his time. Absurdity as the mood of his time, especially in the context of the German occupation and the political climate of France, which he was well aware of. Now, there are some contributing factors that led him to reflect on this theme, absurdity. There are many factors. One of them is that the human person seeks reasons and explanations for everything we do and for everything we experience. But we are constantly frustrated because sometimes we don't get explanation. I mean, this is, if you look at our own lives and if you want to have an explanation for what is happening around us, what disturbs us, we really don't find anything that satisfyingly explains. And therefore, we can be very frustrated. Science, for example, has many dogmatic claims. But at the end, science only ends up in hypothesis. Science does not have foolproof, establishment of any hypothesis. Well, you can say it is closer to certitude, but it is not 100%. Therefore, it remains inadequate in that sense. So instead of understanding, what we find in the world of science is certain opacity and even irrationality. So the second contributing factor is the monotony of life. This, of course, you are very familiar with, particularly in the urban societies today, in our own contemporary times. Life goes on and on in a very orderly, systematic fashion. You get up in the morning, you freshen up yourself, and have breakfast, then you go to school, then you have got your project, you have to come back to work on that. Whatever it is, you have every day certain schedule, weekly some schedules, monthly some schedules. So it is a scheduled life that we lead, and it goes on and on. And this makes life very monotonous. Now we become conscious of this monotony when we begin to think seriously. And that is again for us, it enables us to realize life is all absurd. We keep doing the same thing over and over again in an uninterrupted way and not heading anywhere. The third dimension, or the third factor for absurdity for him, is time itself. We become aware of the fact that time is precious, of course, but it is also our worst enemy. The reason is because we are carried by time. And then at what point in time it suddenly ends and we get destroyed, our life ends. It doesn't take us any further. This too begets absurdity. The fourth dimension is the world. The world as certain hostile element. Very often this hostility is dormant, but suddenly you experience a violent reaction from the world. It could be a kind of flood, massive flood. It could be a tsunami. It could be a wildfire. It could be anything. You suddenly experience a kind of violence in the world in which we live. And you experience this hostility very powerfully. So again, we realize we are thrown into a certain absurdity, and there is no way, and there is no explanation for it. Another dimension, I think this is very true and very unique of the contribution by Camus. Not that others have not said, but then he has underlined it very specifically. What he calls the inhumanity in us. We tend to become oftentimes more inhuman than human, both in our words and in our behavior. We call ourselves rational, but we are capable of violence that are absolutely irrational. Perhaps we are the only ones who engage in violence for the sake of violence. So that is a sad reality. And then we call ourselves as rational, but there is no explanation as to why we become violent and why we turn against one another, why we destroy the lives of others. A serious question that we need to ask today, especially in the context of all that is unfolding right in front of our eyes, the way we treat women. How many times we have heard about the sexual assault and violence that has been unleashed on them recently, of course, in Hattas. Unimaginable, and no explanation possible whatsoever. The final dimension for absurdity is death itself. Death seems to be inevitable. I don't think anybody has escaped it under normal circumstances, the normal understanding of the term death. I'm not speaking the supernatural realm, in the normal human existential dimension of it. Now, what does death do? Death ends all our plans and ambitions. So we may have so much of plans for our lives, may have many ambitions to become this, to become that, suddenly we realize human life itself is fragile and futile. Because the moment we experience death, not only in our lives, but in the lives of others as well. So these are some of these important factors that, Camus considers important to think about absurdity, or make us think about absurdity. Now, Camus also likes to pay attention to the nature of absurdity. So, what is the nature of absurdity? He says, when I look at the world, I find the world neither rational nor absurd. In itself, I cannot find it as meaningful or meaningless. But in relation to the human beings, the world does manifest itself as meaningless, as absurd. So absurdity, therefore, is born out of the confrontation between the human need for the explanation and the unreasonable silence of the world to give reason. Now note, when he uses the word world here, he is not merely referring to the physical world, though it is included, the physical universe, but also the larger understanding of the world in terms of what provides structure and meaning to our lives. Thus, the absurd is neither in the human nor in the world, but in the confrontation. So, human beings themselves are not absurd. The world itself is not absurd. But when we confront the world, we realize life is absurd. Because we seek explanation for many things, but we don't get an answer. Now, this is what exactly he wants to bring out in his famous book, The Myth of Sisyphus, because it dramatically presents the absurd hero. Now, I don't know whether you are aware of this myth of Sisyphus. It's a Greek myth where the gods have condemned Sisyphus for his disobedience, and he is supposed to roll a stone over the cliff. You can never roll a stone over the cliff. It will roll back. But then he doesn't give up. He keeps doing that over and over again. So based on this, absurdity can be explained as the awareness of oneself as condemned to tragic purposelessness. I mean, there's no purpose to roll a stone up the cliff. It's tragic, it's absolutely tragic, without any purpose. But we are condemned to that. And the moment we are aware of it, then that is absurdity. Because Sisyphus had to roll the stone up the hill without any purpose. So, well, that is based on the myth. So there is happiness in him in the refusal to give in his resentful stubbornness to remain in the struggle. He doesn't, give up easily. I mean, he doesn't say, now it's purposeless, so I am not. He is confronting that purposelessness somehow, however stupid it may seem to us. Now, there are various ways in which absurdity can be responded to. For Camus, one of the common responses, or most common responses to absurdity, is to escape from it. He calls this people escape either through physical suicide or through philosophical suicide. Now, we all know what is the meaning of physical suicide. You just take your life, that's all. So it is a voluntary termination of your life. You cannot bear it anymore, so you kind of slip into a kind of, you go deep into that absurdity and you realize, I cannot anymore bear this purposelessness, this meaninglessness, this tragic reality, and therefore let me end my life. This is one form. But there is also what he calls a philosophical suicide, and this is even more dangerous for Camus. Now, philosophical suicide is to take refuge in faith or religion in order to escape the absurd. I may add here, we also can say take refuge in certain dogmatic ideologies. Again, Camus is restricting himself to faith from the religious point of view, but then we also have a lot of ideologies that what religion used to do, ideologies do today. According to Camus, neither physical suicide nor the philosophical suicide is an authentic response to absurdity. Because suicide fundamentally is a cowardly act. And absurdity is only apparently destroyed. It is an easy solution in the face of absurdity, but it doesn't really destroy absurdity itself. Because after all, by taking refuge in faith or religion, you are not learning to deal with absurdity. It's not making anything meaningful anyways. You are still facing the reality of absurdity. Or by ending your life physically, you are not escaping absurdity, because you are only, you are only ending your life. So you are not to overcome absurdity by any ways. Your cowardly decision has not changed anything with regard to absurdity. Now, therefore, this kind of response for him is a response that lacks basic honesty. It lacks basic honesty because it represents a refusal to face the situation of absurdity. You are only compromising in a cowardly manner. You don't have the courage to face it. Now, what is more authentic response to absurdity for Camus is a revolt. If physical suicide or philosophical suicide, they are not a way out, Camus thinks to face the absurd, we have to confront it constantly. So we have to engage in an ongoing struggle over and over again. Although we know that probably we will never win that struggle. So this confrontation is an existential reality, and you have to embrace it. Because it's a confrontation between me and my obscurity. A human being and his own or her own obscurity. Now, the sight of such a struggle is the example of human pride in action. For Camus, there is a certain majesty in this relentless struggle. So, according to him, we need to die unreconciled. It is important that we die unreconciled. So the absurd man, according to him or woman, is without hope in terms of the two human dreams of eternity and total understanding. So an absurd man is not looking up to eternity with hope, nor is he or she looking up to reason by way of full understanding of one's absurd life experience. So religion and reason, both of them are not providing any help. So you don't need to have any hope in these two realities, religion and reason. This is a very groundbreaking thinking, because, in the history of philosophy, if you look at it, for the most part, at one point in time, religion would have been valorized, another point reason, then at a later time they said both are important, it has to be reconciled and so on. But that's, now for Camus, both are completely irrelevant. The revolt against the absurd for him results in a new kind of freedom, and he calls this as an experience of a genuine freedom. Why this is genuine freedom? Because you have no restraint on your action. And this freedom is due to the fact of having no future and no superior being as well. So Camus is saying, I am not leading my life in terms of the future I am looking at. I am not leading my life in terms of God, whom I am looking up to. I am the master of my own life. You and I are masters of our lives. Each individual is his or her own master. So therefore, for Camus, the truly liberated human is totally indifferent to the future. And therefore, the truly liberated human would reject any measure of values, any scale of values. So therefore, he rejects what he calls the ethics of quality and accepts ethics of quantity. Now, let me explain that. What does that mean? Ethics of quality looks for what is the best, whereas ethics of quantity looks for what is the most. So, what is important for the observed human being is not necessarily the best way of living, but the most living life to the utmost possibility. You strive to live more and not better. This is because every action is of equal value. One can live with the irresponsibility of the condemned criminal who has nothing to lose. Now, this has certain dangerous, implications. So, from a certain point of view, while we may appreciate this idea of, being indifferent to future and rejecting the ethics of quality, but as you know, in actual existence, this may lead to a lot of, wild behavior, not only just behavior, but also a wild thinking that may affect human existence very profoundly in the negative sense. So I will come back to that during the discussion, of course. Camus, however, slightly had a change in his later days of life. So he was much more moderate and he began to reconcile a little more compared to his earlier stages of thought, especially after the Second World War. So in the earlier stage, obviously there was a certain amount of extremity in his thinking, by valorizing absurdity so much that you really, have to confront it, and that is the only way you get freedom, and therefore that freedom doesn't look for any values and so on and so forth, can take it to an extreme position. For example, the myth of Sisyphus conclusions can be in total agreement with Hitler's atrocities. So Camus therefore realized himself there are some issues with his thinking. So he himself became convinced of a certain change, especially as he witnessed the Nazi atrocities. And he realized the Nazi atrocities were a logical outcome of the ethics of quantity. Because the ethics of quantity, living the most, doesn't admit any distinction between what is right and wrong. Because it's only the quality that can make you, help you make a distinction between what is right and wrong. So in the later stage, he began to opt for at least some kind of values, at least the rudimentary form, values in life which are important that can limit your freedom. So though originally Camus thinks that freedom is the only value, he tends to now change his approach, especially after his experiences in the Second World War. Therefore, in his later works, Camus gradually expressed his new thought. This is particularly seen in one of the novels, The Plague, he published in 1947. Here Camus argues that we must extend a helping hand to our fellow human beings in order to combat the plague of the irrationality and absurdity. I mean, he is making use of this plague in a metaphorical sense and says one of the most dangerous plagues that we witness today is irrationality and absurdity itself. In the common struggle against the oppressive plague, the common enemy, people have discovered their solidarity. And with this, they have learned the meaning of compassion. If you have time, you can read that novel. It is quite interesting. Humans have an obligation to keep the human solidarity alive by fighting against the plague and fighting for compassion. So you can immediately notice there is a shift. At least there are certain values which are important. That solidarity, compassion. In spite of human solidarity and love for each other, Camus thinks there is still a collective impotence. Namely, despite our fight against the absurd, the ultimate end of the human is death and defeat. That doesn't mean that we need to give up fighting against the absurd. There is no victory over the absurd, perhaps, but still we can keep fighting against it. So Camus now, by invoking the idea of solidarity and compassion for people, reinstates this whole idea of ethics of quality, because these are something good that we need to embrace in our existence. Another important work, novel again, The Rebel, which he published in 1959, Camus makes a very important analysis of rebellion. He takes the rejection of suicide as the foundational principle in his work. The human has decided to live since our personal existence has some value. Why is it that you should not commit suicide? Why committing suicide is not a solution to the existential experience of absurdity? Because there is some value to our personal existence. In this context, Camus makes a distinction between historical rebellion and metaphysical rebellion. Metaphysical rebellion denies absolute freedom and acknowledges existence with some limits. Now, Camus chooses to fight for justice rather than one's own life. It is not the interchange of roles, but an affirmation of the value of humanity. So, metaphysical revolt is based on a belief in a common human dignity. I mean, this is very important. So, he is not looking at, in this context, when he is talking about the metaphysical rebellion, he is looking at what is at the base of this metaphysical rebellion. It basically says we have a shared, human dignity. And in the name of the shared human dignity, we may have to give up certain freedom and to acknowledge that we have to live with certain limits. So it is not my life that comes to the fore and my freedom that comes to the fore, but my sense of justice, because we as humans have dignity. Yesterday I had a discussion with one of my colleagues, is very, very good in social analysis and reality, and then he told me very interestingly, the other day someone of you asked a question about why in Indian, we are not making much of that Indian philosophy and so on. He told me, if you look at the texts that are available before us, the so-called classical texts, the concept of dignity is not there. Now, I have not done a research about that. The concept of dignity has basically 4 sources, he told me. One is the Roman idea of dignitas. The other one is the Judeo-Christian tradition. The third one is enlightenment. And then the fourth one is the Declaration of Human Rights. So, otherwise, there is nothing that India has contributed to that. It's a very important, interesting point to think about it. I have no idea. Now, he was trying to explain all the problems why we are apathetic is basically we cannot think in terms of dignity. It's not part of our traditional writings. I have not done a study or something interesting to look at. Since he is an Indian scholar himself, so probably he is much knowledgeable. But since this idea, you see how Camus has changed from a certain way of looking at life in terms of absolute freedom, and then now trying to give up that absolute freedom in terms of the human dignity because of a certain experience has changed. So he calls this the metaphysical rebellion. Metaphysical rebellion because it is a belief in a common human dignity. This rebellion is induced by a certain belief of an ideal that is a common human dignity. It is a value of humanity that is taken seriously. Now, Camus also notes as to how some historical figures under the defense of human rights have become notorious oppressors of humanity. So, many dreamers of utopias have ended up in failure. I mean, the example is obviously many of those, communist countries, as they lost sight of the what he calls the limit. Now, this is obviously the metaphysical rebellion. So, Camus is not so much focusing on the historical rebellion as it, historically tracing back the rebellion, how it unfolded and so on, but the foundation to that historical rebellion in terms of the metaphysical rebellion. In his last works, two of his major works, the end of his life, The Fall and Exile and Kingdom. The Fall is one book, Exile and Kingdom is another book. Camus enters a certain stage of what his interpreters call repentance. In these works, the human person is not presented as an innocent rebel. So he doesn't present the human person as an innocent rebel, but he presents the human person as a guilty other. One cannot live with one's conscience, because of which one looks for a judge who will condemn him and then pardon him. But there is neither condemnation nor pardon in sight. His famous quotation is this: "Who would dare condemn me in a world without judge, where none is innocent?" Very melancholic phrase, but very powerfully said. Who would dare condemn me in a world without judge, where none is innocent? None is innocent. We are all guilty others. Again, something to think about in the present day situation. We'll come back to that during discussion. I have tried to explain to you briefly about his idea in terms of absurdity and some of the contributing factors, and what is nature of absurdity and how we can respond to absurdity, and how he responded to this very idea of absurdity in his latter years by bringing in some moderation without valorizing too much on the ethics of quantity, but also reinstating the ethics of quality, and how in those contexts, how he has come to embrace some of the important values like solidarity, compassion, and he wants us to adopt a metaphysical rebellion, not in terms of my freedom, but in terms of the common human dignity. I mean, there is a foundation why I should be rebellious to what is happening around me. All that I witness, why I should rebel against it. Not because I am free, but because I believe or I accept in a common human dignity. So Camus succeeded to imprint his mark on the literary and the philosophical world. And I think he is one of the elegant spokespersons of our age. Particularly, some of the ideas are very significant for us today. He's somehow looked at human beings, or noticed that human beings are victims of what can be called cruel mathematics, a kind of very systematic, orderly way of doing things, but we have to face it with courage. One of the important things I admire in Camus is that he had the courage and the honesty to change his views. So he was not stubbornly holding on to his earlier views on absurdity and was trying to defend it tooth and nail by all means. Once he experienced certain things that was very disturbing, he thought how his own thinking could be interpreted in that light, and how that is going against the very spirit for which he stands. So he kept himself open. I think a hallmark of a good philosopher is to remain open-ended, and thus ended up in a philosophy built around solidarity, compassion, justice, and repentance. With this, I will end my lecture on Camus. We shall spend some time for discussion. Thank you.